Today I'm joined by musicians and artists Michael Cuming and Silvana van Dijk from the Australian musical duo Visions of a Nomad. I've been friends with these guys for a couple of years now, and they're just really fascinating. In the interview we discuss how they met, why Silvana left an international modelling career, and Michael his own touring musical project to disappear for months into the Australian outback with just a spear and driving a 4x4. We discuss Michael's death experience in a hang gliding accident that radically changed his life, his time living as the personal secretary to an Indian guru with supernatural powers, and their deep connection to the indigenous people of Australia. It's a really interesting conversation, so without further ado, Michael and Silvana. I'm here today in Byron Bay with Michael Cuming and Silvana van Dijk. They perform internationally, and you guys just returned from the Nizhville Jazz Festival in Serbia, right?
Yes.
Yeah, how was that?
It was absolutely fantastic. It was been a highlight in our career so far, purely from the perspective that some of the finest musicians in the world are jazz musicians, people like John Coltrane, Dizzy Gillespie, Miles Davis, and all these people have... We were playing on the same stage as some musicians who'd worked with these people, and so the standard was incredibly high and made us feel very proud of ourselves to be... We're the first Australian group ever to play there in 25 years.
I didn't know that. Wow. So tell us a bit about Visions of a Nomad. How did it get started? How did you two start the thing, and what's it all about?
Okay, that goes back... I had a band called Dreamtime, which originally, going back to, I think I registered as a theatre company in 1981. And I always see art, music, dance, culture as part of living philosophy. So I wanted to start my own theatre company, my own platform of expression and recognition of those things. And, you know, I mean, my self-growth has always been worth more to me than money. Money's a fun thing, but it comes and goes. So I took it very seriously at a very early age that I wanted to learn as much as I could and bring it about as a living philosophy that can also be expressed to the world, so there's some enrichment of the world through the process. I enrich myself, and therefore through my outgivings, hopefully do some good for the world as well.
How long has Visions of a Nomad been going? I know you've been your whole life doing these things, but how long
that was 81. I think Visions of a Nomad started in 1992. I'd been with Silvana. I met Silvana I was travelling on tour with Dreamtime. That's how I got to that. I was travelling in the desert, and I was just come from Uluru, where we'd spent quite a few months, and that was the time Halley's Comet was burning in the sky.
Oh yeah.
So when Halley's Comet was burning in the sky, I was in a cave inside Uluru with cave paintings, with dingoes howling, playing music in this sacred cave. So, I mean, that experience is so beautiful, you know, like... And then it was from there that I went up to Darwin to do a big festival, drumming up Darwin. I was coming back to the East Coast, and I met Silvana, who was going the opposite direction. She was going to Uluru. And I fell in... I don't know if I fell in love. I was so drawn to this person. I had a very strange experience. I was walking past a toilet block in a campground.
Right.
And I walked past her, and a voice said to me, "That's the one."
Really?
Yeah. And she didn't know it.
No, right.
So I had the next month or two was kind of...
Who's that little scrunchy guy there?
Anyway.
Or something like that. I don't remember.
And I felt we had something together we had to explore. So we went back to Arnhem Land and lived out in Arnhem Land we were out there for a little while. And then we went for 3 months. We were living in the bush, 400 kilometres away from... we left the Aboriginal people. All we had was a spear and an old four-wheel drive. We went to a really isolated place and caught our own food every day. I went hunting for shark, and so live that, which for me was always a bit of a dream. I want to be able to just live off the land, you know, like have nothing. I mean, and just be a part of nature, and so that was a wonderful experience.
And I came from a total opposite world.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm from Holland. I was a model. At that time I was modeling, and my sister and I were both modeling internationally, working for magazines like Vogue, working with the best photographers and going here and there. And I actually came from New York. I had to go back to Holland, and I had a contract with an agency in Australia, a modeling contract. And I absolutely didn't know anything about Australia, not really. And so my sister and I came here, and we absolutely loved the place. We thought we arrived in paradise, really.
Really?
And I remember one of the first days of being in Australia, from my agency, they told me to go and get like a Refidex, you know? Because when you need to go and look for work, you know, they send you on go-sees and see the magazines and the photographers. So I very clearly remember on my first day I walked into a nails agent, and I went to the back to get a Refidex, and then my eye caught this book. It was a beautiful book, and it was about Aboriginal people. So I went straight there, I picked up the book, and I said to my sister, "We're going there. We're going there." I didn't know anything about it. Anyway, then I did my modeling contract, and I made some nice money and stuff. So we bought ourselves a backpack, and we bought ourselves a Greyhound pass to go around Australia on the bus. It was all very exciting, you know, like because we came from a world where, you know, we were driven around in limousines, and but although we were models, we were always interested in, for example, staying in New York, we would go to Highland to attend African dance classes, and you know, things that they were unheard of, you know, in the late 80s, around those times, and people were surprised we were doing those things. I think we were a little bit reckless too. We had no fear, and especially me. And so that's how I ended up in a place called Mediterranean, which are like hot springs in the desert, and that's where I met Michael, and that's how I ended up going to Arnhem you know, living with indigenous people and sleeping under the stars. I've never done anything like it in my life, and it was actually quite an intense experience. It's really intense.
What was that first meeting like then? You didn't hear the voice, I guess.
No, that was in my head, not hers.
No, I didn't have the voice. I said, "That's the guy."
Yeah, right.
I don't know what happened. It was all very.
It was a shock to her.
Strange.
I'd been living in the bush for a year,
and
living by fire and, you know, travelling.
With your band, or?
Yeah, well, we'd done festivals, and we'd done 3 months in an Aboriginal community.
Yeah.
You know, just we'd been at Uluru for 3 months in the campground there.
You know the saying that opposites attract?
Yeah.
I think that really was the case here. Like you couldn't get more opposite.
Yeah.
But at the same time we had a lot in common as well. My interest in music and culture and indigenous stuff and art and, you know, all of those things. So even though we were really from opposite directions, we also had a lot in common. And I think that was one of the main things that was very attractive to me. Yeah, because I don't think I met that before, not in that kind of context. Yes.
Must have been quite striking meeting to suddenly take a right turn out of modelling, out of all that life,
for me too.
into the bush.
Yeah,
for you,
well,
for me also, because I mean I'd just been there and done that, and my band was going back to the East Coast, and so it was sort of like me derailing my own project. So you know, it was quite. But
what were they going to the East Coast for?
well, just for going. We'd been travelling around the desert, around Australia for a year. So it was sort of a project that I initiated, and here I was, you know, 3/4 of the way around jumping off at a right angle.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel that the people I was with justified my attention as much as she did.
Mm-hmm.
It was that simple. So it was kind of, it was a hard thing that I felt, wow, this person has impressed me. I don't even know them. I haven't even, we'd hardly said 2 words to each other. But there was something that I had to, that I felt that I had to pursue. And it wasn't just that. She, what's the best way to explain it? She sort of reassured me, because I wanted to go back to Arnhem, and I wasn't ready to go back to the East Coast. I wanted to spend more time there. So the fact that somebody else wanted to go as well made up my mind for me. I thought, well, that's it.
So back to Arnhem, what's there?
Well, Arnhem Land is an Aboriginal reserve, and things are very traditional there and very intact, and the spiritual energy's a lot more alive, there than because of their traditional beliefs and their empowerment of that within a place that they call their own, that isn't, run by a Western, government, or you know what I mean?
Right.
I mean, they still have to maybe have some rules or something to do with the outside, but you're walking into a world that's very, very old.
And it's still there?
Still there.
Wow.
Still there. And in fact, the strange thing about Australia is it's still here too. You're right where you're sitting. It's just buried under a lot of other blueprints. But the funny thing is, if you're talking about blueprints, if you're dyeing something and there's black in there to begin with, doesn't matter what colour you put over there, it's going to come out black. Mm-hmm. So the blueprint is so strong in the land for so long, the harmony, the cultural things, the spiritual things, that they pervade even the most modern places. For example, places where in Byron we have markets, or we're having those markets there because that's what happened there. That's the blueprint of what happened there before. That's where people met and exchanged goods.
And is that a deliberate mimicking
of
those traditional ways, or is it just the pattern just emerges?
It's a magnetism, and that's what's fascinating about it.
About Australia?
I think so. I think I don't think this is exclusive to Australia. I think this magnetism exists all over the place. And in fact, we had an experience of it in Serbia recently, where we just went for a holiday but got drawn to a mountain that was a pyramid, and things like this. So, but in Australia, there's, we call it the song lines. There's paths that people have trodden here for so long that if you walk those paths, you'll run into people you know. It's kind of like that. This is Australia's a big place, but
What do you mean you run into people you know? What do you mean by
that? There's a spiritual energy here that really pervades the place. It was even in how the law was evolved and created, that you're always someone's brother. You're always only 2 steps removed from somebody who's family. So this was done through skin law, that you would take a totem, even though you're from another tribe. So you would always be only 1 or 2 steps removed from somebody as family. And it was a way of a social and a political and a philosophical and a spiritual way of maintaining culture, that you are my brother, essentially. We might have some problems with, hunting rights or whatever, but the West did it in a different way. They married off people. So they created the same thing, but it was almost often a forced contract. Not to say that it didn't happen here exactly the same way. But it's interesting that because there's not so much physical overlay on this land like there is in Europe,
right?
The old dreaming paths, the old, points of attraction, they still remain very strong, even though we'll build the opera house on them or whatever. It's just, I can't explain it more than that. It's a strong blueprint.
Coming from Europe, living in this country, I have different roots, I wasn't born here, so maybe my perception of this place is a little bit different to the people that are actually born and had generations here. But how I see this, the simplest explanation for me is that nature rules here.
Yes.
And you need to listen to the signs. You need to tune into the nature here, and it gives you strange signs. And what Michael said about, you don't have those layers and layers of different, century stuff happening, on a human level, and wars and different civilizations. Yeah. I just went back to Europe a few times, and when I'm there, I feel like I can't really connect with what's there on that natural level. Yeah. Because there have been so many layers, yes. And when you're sensitive, you do tune into all that's what's happened there. Yeah. On some level.
It's a more human thing.
Specifically, if you've been living in a very natural place like that, you become more in tune with stuff like that. And I miss it when I go back to Europe. So, I really want to get in touch with the land, and I want it to give me some signs,
Like what sort of signs are you talking
like
about?
when you're in
like a crow flying over or something.
Oh,
what are we talking
a lot
about?
of animals have specific.
Can be like that.
A lot of animals have specific meanings,
yes.
And they will come with you. For example, the curlew bird is a warning bird, and we've had it many times in our life. We were in Brisbane one time, and that curlew bird walked in we were in a warehouse like this, but in the city.
Right.
Curlew bird walked into our place, walked up to us, looked at us, and stayed around for about 20 minutes and just looked at us. And that bird was telling us that shit was going to happen. So, and soon after that,
a few hours after
Silvana's mother was diagnosed with cancer. And
I got a phone call about my mother being terminally diagnosed with cancer. But that's just one. I had the same thing happen with my dad when he was here.
And with Mona one time when she was in danger, that bird came to our window. And so there's a lot of birds, like a lot of animals. That's the interesting thing about Australia is, and in the Dreamtime stories, though, for example, all along the east coast of Australia, there are stories of how the rivers and streams were created. And in many of the stories, the giant serpent plays a role in this. Now, there actually were giant snakes. They found a snake fossil up in Lightning Ridge or somewhere up there. I'm not sure exactly where, but they said it was 1 metre in diameter, the body of the snake, and about 30 metres long. Now, you imagine animals this size moving in low areas, same as crocodiles do. They make rivers and lakes and streams. So for us in the Dreamtime lore to be told that this occurred, modern science can't really find the connection, but the truth is things were much bigger then. Animals were much bigger, the forces of nature were bigger then. And a lot of those stories are metaphoric as well, that maybe the dolphin brother fighting the goanna brother, so it might be the land spirit fighting the earth spirit. It may be an ancient story of a volcano taking over part of the ocean. So what's amazing here is you have a lineage from then till now unbroken.
Yeah.
So even the Aboriginal people who have evolved on the land, as animals have, are connected to the animals and connected to the stories and connected to the land. And so that comes through as a very strong picture, monoframe. I can't explain it in a different way. It's like a perfect example of something left alone to evolve, and that there is a memory of that story. In Europe, because of the Ice Age, because of volcanoes, there was a lot of shift and movement of tribes, and one took over the other. And for example, we went to Italy a couple of years ago, and I was just driving. We were driving or something. I said to Silvana, I don't know, but I get a feeling that who was the guy? Hannibal came in. Now, how could we're in like mid-Europe, and that can't be right. But yes, that was Lugano, which was where he watered his elephants. So in Europe, we get a much stronger impression of the people who have come, and the conquests, and the changes, and the architecture, and the philosophy, and the intellectualization. And it's a bigger. I think Europe also is more land than water. I mean, the Northern Hemisphere. In the South, we have more water than land. So there's a different thing going on here. It's an intuitive, dreamy it's more dreamy and it's more circular. And you'll see that in the Aboriginal designs in the circular. So it's kind of like something that Europe might have been a long time ago. You find it a little bit in Greece, that dreamy, mythological, dreamy thing. I found it very much in Greece. I found a connection to our kind of thing over here because of water, you know, because of the water. And they've even got echidnas, they've even got hedgehogs there and gum trees. So it's almost a mini
Australia.
Mini southern, you know, kind of thing now. That's maybe why the Greeks all emigrated here.
So you're talking about Dreamtime and these indigenous cosmologies and stories and so on. So I have two. I know you've got a very deep connection to those people, and I'm very curious to know how that started and how that began. But before you answer that, I'm also curious. You're saying about seeing warning birds and the signs of the land speaking to you. Is that because you're able to tune in and see those things? Is it because you're special in that way, or you know how to look, or would anyone?
Okay, I'll give you an example. I'll give you an analogy, a metaphor.
Yeah. Which way is it?
You're out in a boat on the ocean. The novice will probably get washed up on the rocks. If you're a sailor, you read the signs of the water. You see the seagulls. You know maybe there's, because the seagulls are close, there's land close. You know the currents. You know what you're working with. So it's really purely that everybody can do it. Everybody can be aware of. You know, if I went to the football, I probably wouldn't be aware of who the latest player is. So I'd appear, you know, it might even lose me my position in the box stand. You know.
Yeah. So maybe those things are related then. How you become a reader of these signs and how you become tuning into the land and so on, and how your connection with the indigenous people of Australia began. I mean, can you talk a bit about that connection? Because it's been you spent an awful lot of time with them.
My first friend at school was an Aboriginal girl, from a remote community. So, you know, that was the age of 4 or 5. When I was 17, I went out west and became a horseman, a stockman, and I worked exclusively pretty well with an Aboriginal stockman for 2 years every day on horseback, and we would discuss anything from, you know, spirits we'd seen, or, you know, even at that place, I one night woke up in this old bluestone mansion, with 20 acres of English gardens. I was the only one there, you know, 17-year-old kid, and I woke up in the middle of the night and saw a shape drifting across the lawn. You know, I mean, there wasn't anyone I could go, you know, there wasn't any. It was an experience, you know, and those things can invoke a certain amount of fear, but for me they always hold more fascination than fear. So,
well, it's not normal, is it, to be going out in the middle of there, 17, working as, you know, with the horses and so on?
It's not.
That's not a common path.
No,
so maybe
we
should go even one step before.
Well, one step back from that. I was an A-grade student. I would be top of my class every year and blah, 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 and I was very artistic and always do my work so that I could go down to the art centre and paint or... But when I got to a point in school where, you know, especially when you get to things like trigonometry, and I just thought, this is useless shit. You know, I don't want to fill my head with numbers. So I left school and went and I thought, well, what's an exotic thing what's one of the things I want to get off my bucket list? You know, I guess, or something that I would find truly exciting. I love horses, love the bush. I'll become a stockman. So I became a stockman, and that was a hard life. I have to get up at 4 in the morning and catch my horse to go and catch the cows, to milk it just to give everyone milk for breakfast. That's by 6 or 7 o'clock, and then go out stock work all day. So yeah, that's sort of, it was a radical thing. But I loved also writing poetry, and it was an experience, and I just wanted to absorb it. So I learned how to be on my own. And really enjoy my own company and write. But, you know, I wrote poetry and learned to use a stock whip really well. So I was a very good horseman. And, yeah. So, but then I got drawn back to the city by a Rudolf Steiner school, a job that I went for. I got the cook got me the sack because her daughter liked me. So that's how I had to leave there. Wasn't my fault.
What were you doing in the Rudolf Steiner school?
I was a house parent. I was only 18, 19 by this stage, and they wanted someone about over 21 for the job. I didn't even know I was going for the job as a house parent. I thought I was going for a job as a gardener.
Right.
And they rang me up and said, "Oh, you've got the job." Came down there and they said, "Oh, this is one of your kids." This guy was 15, and this is another one. He was 26. He was older than me. So these were my two charges, and I just found anyway. So I went with it, lived there, and lived in that Rudolf Steiner School as a house parent for 2 years until I had a hang gliding accident. But I learned a lot in that time as well. Living with intellectually handicapped, whatever we would call it. These people are amazing people.
Mentally challenged.
Well, they've changed the title all the time, but they are amazing people. That what it taught me is what people lack in one direction, they will gain in another. So we can never underestimate anyone's consciousness. If somebody looks like a fool, it's probably because he isn't. So that really taught me that, and that they move in different. The power of their communication skills and working in an astral way is quite phenomenal. I saw things there and experienced spirit invocations of spirits through them, which was fascinating.
What do you mean by that? An invocation of spirit?
Well, I think if you're not Earth, if you as a being, as a human being spirit in a body, if you're not Earth, you have the ability, capacity, or vulnerability to be usurped or by other forces, you know what I mean? Because we don't know a lot in the physical realm about the spiritual realm. We can guess and we can say, but I've seen, for example, possessions and things like this, where people have not a strong earthly will, but they have a floating spirit, and where something that can manifest as them being channeled or as them channeling something else. So I saw quite a few interesting experiences there that really challenged me. And in fact, the one experience I had there frightened the hell out of me. It was the most frightening experience I've ever had in my life. And it was kind of like a darkness and a spirit approaching me and making a sound at me from that darkness. And I actually physically died in that moment. I was so scared. My spirit, when they say you're frightened to death, my spirit left my body. I went out the top of my head, and then literally like a spirit guide, my heart stopped, and a spirit guide or somebody, my conscience said to me, "Get 100 miles away from here now." And I ran on the spot, and I got out of there. And I had to live around that place for a while with other people. But I actually, after I'd had my death experience, which I'll tell you about in a minute, I went back to that place to challenge myself about fear. And so darkness is only darkness, and light always overcomes darkness. So that's what I had to show myself from that. I actually went back to the same place and tried to break into that room and go and face that fear. I couldn't break into the house because it was too well boarded up. It was a huge old 40-room mansion. And I was the only one there under a full moon with pine trees blowing in. I thought, you've come far enough. You don't need to break the law and smash the window to get in there. But
so you left the Steiner School and went hang gliding? Yeah.
Well, hang gliding was one of the things I loved doing. I love surfing. I like those kind of things, like surfing. And hang gliding I had before I went out to the bush. I had actually played quite a part in designing and building hang gliders. Not so much the designs were someone else's that I was working on, but I love birds and kites and eagles, and I'd always studied this in my mind of how to fly, how could I fly. And then of course hang gliders came about, so of course I was in there, and I used to fly around a lot. So even when I was working at the Steiner School, I would go maybe hang gliding on the weekends.
Yeah, and that's where you had this accident.
I came up north here, actually to Byron Bay, and I jumped off a place no one's ever jumped off before, up in St Helena. Well, they do now. They fly up there sometimes, but no one. And I was flying. I was up quite high, and I thought I'll fly towards Byron. There was a big forest, And over forest you get a lot of downdraft. So I was coming down very quickly. I decided to come back. And there's a small paddock that I had to do a really tight manoeuvre from very high to sort of come down because there was a barbed wire fence halfway along it, so I had a very small place to land. Got caught, to cut a long story short, got caught in a downdraft, went head first in from about 150 metres really fast. I just went like that, straight down. And crashed, and first sound I heard was, have you ever stood on a potato chip? Yeah, that's the sound I heard. That was my whole body just crushing up, like this wham. And then, but I had a really amazing spiritual experience in that thing. Because I've been flying around for about 2 or 3 hours, I wasn't attached to the earth, and I was a single guy and no responsibilities. And I guess at the stage when most people die, they look back, you know, what am I going to miss? Who am I leaving behind? Should I really go? And I just went with it. It was like so I moved very fast in myself and out through the top of my head like lightning, and a lot of strange experiences like smoke, like my spirit turned inside out, and that thing of being able to see your whole life in front of you was like the way I could describe it would be like I was in the middle of a 10,000 faceted jewel, you know, and every face of that jewel was another experience of my life. So there was everything. There was Mickey Mouse, there was the alphabet, there was everybody I'd ever known, there was every story that had ever been told. That, you know, it's like, and it all goes very fast. You look at it, you see all these things that you've gone through, and then there was that kind of feeling like turning inside out, and then I was then I went to this violet void. I was just in this huge violet void, and I remember saying to myself, holy crap, this is what it's like to be dead. It's beautiful, it's so peaceful. And then I thought, but I'm still here. So I reached, you know, there was a couple of things I learned in this. One was when I projected into the horizon. As we have eyes and we project, I learned a lot about how our spirits work in this moment, because I projected into the horizon, and suddenly I was moving at the speed of light. I was moving so fast, but there's nothing I'm going to or from. So suddenly I'm staying still. So it made me realise that when we're even in our human body, we look at the moon, we go to the moon and back. Maybe we didn't used to, and maybe that's why we didn't know it was round, but we're getting this courage to stretch our spirits. We go to the moon and back, and like a rubber band, we snap back and we go, moon, round, long way away. But I can sense it, you know. But the funny thing about being in a space that has no form, speed is only relative to an object. So there's no point trying to go anywhere or go fast. It's like, so anyway. So then I thought, well, I wonder if I have a body. So I went to feel my leg with my arm, but I didn't have an arm to feel my leg with. So I imagined an arm, and I went to feel my leg. And I made the motion with it like this, and I could feel that motion down to my leg, but then there was no leg, so the motion kept on going. So I just went with it. I thought, oh, fuck this is, you know, go with it. So I just left, and I just unwound, and I just became the whole universe. Total peace, total amazing. Like life on Earth doesn't even. Life on Earth pales in comparison to the wonderfulness of that experience. Yeah. So there's me there for 1,000 years, and then bang. I feel first thing I feel is my hands, the tips of my fingers. And then slowly it was like being in honey. And I came back. And then I opened my eyes at some point. I don't even remember when I opened my eyes. And I got up and there was people there, and I'd been there for about 6 or 8 minutes, and I had, had a clinical death. There was no sign of life in me, and I just spontaneously come back. And when I got up, and there was nothing wrong with me. This is what I couldn't work out. I got up, and there was absolutely nothing wrong with me, and I walked around. This kite was all like really crumpled, and
No bruises or broken bones, nothing?
my wrists were a little bit. I was in a state of something else. I wasn't even really thinking, but I got up and I walked around, and I said, this is really weird. I walked around that thing, and I said, why am I back? Why am I back? Why am I back? And I said it 3 times, and then I've never, ever really asked that question about anything ever again. I don't ask the question why. It's because. You know what I mean? So it was something really profound, that there was no there was no logical reason why it should happen, and I was so baffled by that it blew my mind, the question why. It totally blew why out of the equation. And then if I even think about why, it's a bullshit question. Because, why is the grass green? Oh, because of chlorophyll. Why is chlorophyll green? Oh, because of elimination of all rays except the green. But why does that happen? It'll go on forever. There's no why is an infantile question in a way. You know what I mean? How is a different story. So I became more interested in how. And in fact, that's what started me on my journey. I'd done meditation when I was young. When I was a teenager, I'd done transcendental meditation a lot. And but that brought me back to meditation, that I have to go back to this place where I went. And that became an obsession for me. My life changed. A lot of very strange... after that had happened, I'd find myself driving along in a motor vehicle and not being able to drive more than 5 miles an hour, because it was like driving through honey. I'd be going like, whoa, I could feel everything so strongly. It was quite overwhelming for me. I would find myself talking poetry to the stars, beautiful poetry to the stars, or knowing everything that was going to happen weather-wise. I still have that to some degree. Well, I still have that, but things were really extreme, for a long... So I went back to the place where I was born.
Which was where?
Melbourne. And I took a little country house just outside of Melbourne. I thought, if I can't do it where I'm born, I can't do it anywhere. Because, you can be free somewhere not at home. But if you can't find freedom at home, you don't have freedom. That was my sort of philosophy at the time. So I went back to where I was born purposely, though. I thought, well, if I just got to find this. And I lost a lot of my friends. They thought I was maybe wacky. Or I'd fast for 12 days at a time, and I ran an organic fruit and veggie co-op and meditated every day. I just wake up, and I had a piano. I'd do a little bit of music, and I'd do a bit of gardening or the work with the co-op. But my task was to get back to where I'd come from. So this went on for two years. Brought me to a point of crisis. Was I'd given up all my friends. Didn't go out with girls anymore. I'd had a few, and it just didn't. There wasn't enough interesting there, so I wanted to find this. What was I saying about the crisis point was to inspire me with this journey. I would read a bit, people like Autobiography of a Yogi, and in fact I was reading that book, and I'd been using a technique for a few months that I'd read about somewhere. It was a breath kind of retention technique or something that was, and I've been fasting and I'm eating sprouts and I'm being good, Mr. Goody Two-Shoes here, And then he warns in this book of the danger of this kind of technique, that it's maybe not so kosher. So here's me, giving up everything, eating a pittance a day, so 100% dead sure that I need to find this, and I'm so confused. I don't know how to do it. In fact, the energy I put in, I'm now told that this is the wrong thing. So I literally was in desperation in this moment and cried. And I remember because I'm not religious, but I just looked up to the sky and I said, for fuck's sake, send me someone who knows. So that was my prayer, you know. My prayer was like, I got angry with the Spirit, the Great Spirit. And I said, for fuck's sake, you know I'm 100% dead set about this finding, you know, like opening this in myself, and for whatever reason, if this is what I'm meant to do, you better bloody well send me someone, because I don't know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So 3 days later, or a week later or something, it was a very short time later, I had a dream of... No, I woke I remember the sequence because I'd had the dream, but I didn't place it with this experience. A friend came round. I had one friend left, American fellow, and he wanted to take me out. And he dropped off a paper at my doorstep. And I opened the paper, and there was a picture of an Indian guy there. And I looked at this picture, and as soon as I looked at the picture, I thought, yeah, I know him. I know this guy. And you can't, you know, when you've seen someone before, you don't know where you've seen them. So that's the experience I had. And that was kind of, and it said guru of love, yogi, and, you know, I'm a bit sceptical about those things, having done a lot of what I considered at the ripe age of 19, a lot of, or whatever it was, a lot of work on myself. So, you know, it was anyway. So I was a bit sceptical anyway. I looked at that and I thought, yeah, well, we'll see, you know. I didn't. I put the paper away. And about, I don't know, sometimes suddenly it hit me that I had seen his face in a dream about 2 or 3 days before. And I remembered his face from that dream. And I was so, like, I thought, well, there's some connection here. I have to call this guy. So I picked up the phone, rang him, and he answers the phone. He goes, so, what do you want? I said, something I said, oh, I want to come see you. So, we have been together before. Slowly, you will understand. That was the first words he said to me. Anyway, I went and met him. I didn't have a lot of money to pay him, or he was charging people for sessions and things like that. And he said to me, well, if you teach the yoga, the physical yoga, I'll teach you the spirit, the meditational stuff. So he instructed me what to, you know, teach, and I'd done a bit of that, you know, yoga and stuff and all that, Tai Chi and all those sorts of things. But he instructed me in his methods of. So then I became the physical yoga teacher there, the Hatha yoga teacher, and then he just initiated me for free in all those other things. And that was fascinating because that's where the journey really started for me there. I had some very, very potent, powerful experiences living with him. And they were going through my deepest fears. They were being able to completely let go, have no concept of who I am, and go into completely the causal state, which is like, it's electric and beautiful and timeless and what's the word, unboundless. And this is, you know, the state that I experienced when I was dead. So, but it became like a drug for me, you know. I would be sitting every day at work, I went, oh, gotta get there again, you know. I'm gonna have me some
using
of that.
These techniques, these meditative
yeah,
techniques.
Yeah, and I've got to have me some of that again, you know. So, but then...
What was, if I may ask, where did he come from?
He was from India.
Was his training
He travelled with Bhagwan. He travelled with Rajneesh. You remember Rajneesh? Yeah. They were travelling buddies for a while, and they split in schools of thought only slightly. It's from a Tibetan tradition, tantric tradition, and they both had similar teachers and other teachers, but they had travelled together for a while. And what the two, there's only a couple of things.
Was he a colleague or a student of Rajneesh?
Colleague. Oh. They were colleagues, and but the two schools of thought only differed in a tiny way. And one was that Rajneesh believed he could mass enlighten the world. And this felt, the guy, Swami Krishna, Gautam, who I live with, he didn't believe that was possible. And in fact, that big collapse happened not too late after that, because you can't empower a whole lot of people with goodwill who don't have goodwill. So, it became about guns and drugs and possession of,
With Rajneesh.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And a lot of other things, and a lot of sexual abuse. And
well publicised there with Rajneesh, his organisation.
I love him. What a great orator he is. I mean, if you read anything of what he said, it's unbelievable. He's one of the world's greatest orators, I'm no joke. But you can't, just because you can talk it, and he knew it, doesn't mean you can sway everybody to do the same thing at the same time. I give him credit for his ability to try. Maybe if you could persuade enough people to really embrace it, like the 100th monkey thing, and everybody, and maybe that's the whole point we're all trying to get to, that we get enough communicators and educators and liberators going in, that we stop buying into the old paradigm that Donald Trump's leading and buy into a new paradigm where, hey, it's all about abundance and you can have anything you want as long as you're willing to share it,
Do you know anything about the specifics of the Tibetan lineages that he was
yes,
exposed
he
to?
had a master. Thakur was his master there, and there was a lineage there, yes. But what was far more interesting to me, because I'm not a traditionalist, and that's why I would never be a guru.
Right.
I've got to do something different than the guy before me. You know what I mean? I couldn't see myself sitting on a cushion or, giving darshan regularly. I mean, it's like 9 to 5, no good, I'm just having fun. I'm just having fun. But the thing that was far more interesting to me was what he possessed in terms of insight and knowledge. He would know what I was doing at the other end of the house. I had weird experiences with him. One day when I left, I had given up everything. I didn't know who I was. I'd given up everything in my life, and he'd kicked me out as well. He kicked me out. He said, "Go." And I thought it was maybe because all the girls liked me. So
And not him.
Yeah. And so I thought that's fair enough. So anyway, I went and lived on the other side of it was Melbourne at the time, because he was in Elwood. And I remember thinking, well, there's no reason for me to be in the city if I'm not studying with him or learning from him. So I said, well, I'm going to go. And I met a girl, nice girl. So let's leave. I said, before I leave, I want you to introduce you to this guy so you have some idea of knowing what I'm about. You know what I mean? It was like you might, and maybe he can, initiate you into his field of understanding and things like that, and that will help you understand me. So I rang. He hadn't let me. Not that I'd tried to go there, but I hadn't seen him for months and months and months, and he'd kicked me out. So I just rang this day. I said, look, and he answered the phone. He said, so what do you want? I said, oh look, I've met a girl. She's going to travel with me. I wanted to meet you. Said, okay. I said, but I'm going to drop her off. Shall I come or just leave her there? Okay. So I come. So I go in and there's maybe 100 people in meditation. Big house, and they had a foundation. So I thought, well, I'm not going to, I used to be his personal secretary, so I was like the closest person to him. But so it was this sort of, so I thought, I'll just go right down the back in the corner. Sent her up the front. Well, she went up the front, met him. And then, so I'm sitting there, and then I meditated. I had quite a, just really nice to be there, and I just had a really deep meditation. And then everybody had gone, and I'm still sitting there. And he came. There was like a meditation, and people had left, and then the music was going, and I was just sitting there. And he walked. No, I remember how I felt at first. I was just sitting there, and this fire went through me, like fucking fire, man, like electric fire, like this, like that, and then it was like it'd been filled up to here, and then it went again, whoa, through me, and then it was like it's filled up to here, and then again, it was like it's filled up to here, and then again, it was like it's filled up to here. It went to my throat area, my throat chakra. Went to my throat, that's right, and this time it was like it just swelled like a balloon from here, and swelled like a balloon and like a balloon, and then I went out. So it was in my throat. And went into this really amazing samadhi experience. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. And I don't know how long it was, a day or whatever, before I came out of that. It was probably 2 or 3 hours, I don't know. But anyway, as I came out of that, I opened my eyes and he's sitting right in front of me. And he says, "So, it was good?" And I said, "Yeah." And I didn't say anything. I just crawled to him like a baby. And just lay in his arms. And he was cuddling me like a child. And I'm looking up at him, and because I was just so fucking whacked, man. I was so blissed out. I looked up at him, and I said, I looked at him and I said, that was my throat chakra opening. Or we talked about it. I don't remember how we talked about it. He said, "So, you have understood." And he said, what was amazing to me was that I'd been out on the road hitchhiking, trying to get a lift to nowhere, only 12 hours before. I had nothing. I owned nothing. I literally didn't know who I was or what, I had no concept of myself that was a paradigm. So, and this is what the throat chakra is all about, is the throat chakra is about attachment. You know what I mean? So the placement of you in your world, and anyone who's highly religious will generally have quite a closed throat chakra. It's like you get to the blue, but you'll never get to the indigo. You'll get to the sky, but you'll never get to outer space, because you've got a concept of where you are. You think you're already in space. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But you've just attached to a concept or a paradigm. Mm-hmm. And, my concept and paradigm had been even, at that point, I guess, even spirituality. Mm-hmm. So that's a concept too. So anyway, what was amazing was I had these kind of really deep, powerful, energetic experiences that took me back to this samadhi, this death space, this oneness of everything. So then I left. I haven't seen him since. That was, 30 years ago maybe. I don't know, how old was I then? 21?
40 years ago.
21. It was almost, not quite 40, but 35 years ago. And I've been travelling ever since, practicing those. But I even gave up meditation. Not gave it up, but if you're sweet enough, you don't need sugar. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that I like to apply that in my work, apply that in my music. My music's a meditation. If I can become spiritually aware through that process and use my body. In fact, that was what I was leading to. The thing that I got annoyed about myself was this became like a drug to me. And I was living, wherever I'd live, in the afternoon I'd lie down and have a nap and have this electric experience. And I thought, I started getting a bit annoyed with myself and thinking, what are you doing? You've got hands, you've got a body, you've got energy, you've got spirit, you've got youth. Get out there and do something with your life. You have plenty of time for lying down later, So I kind of got, and so I've had that kind of attitude ever since, that I want to be highly active while I'm in my body. And what I've learned through that is that actually that's where the greatest spiritual growth is, because it's through our body and through knowing how to overcome adversity, and through knowing to overcome fear, and through knowing how to overcome tiredness, and how to regenerate and be dynamic. This is the greatest spiritual experience we have on earth. So meditation is the easy part. Go and learn to be with yourself. Yeah, that's fine. But after you've learned to be with yourself, then you have to learn to overcome fear, anxiety, pain, stress, all those things that mean that because you'll take that. It's not about what you do here on earth. It's about taking that with you further on. Because when you're in an empty space with nothing, and you start getting fearful, that's the time you need the light to banish the darkness. Not, You know what I mean? Not, it's
And you learn to work with these energies through life.
Exactly. We were given the body as a tool to learn to work with these energies directly and have a real sensibility and a palette for how we can utilise those things in a spiritual way beyond death. That's what I truly believe, and that's why I'm prepared to give everything I have in this life to please myself. Truly please myself, not some shadow of, oh, you know, that's good enough or that's good. No, I want to fucking make sure I've done everything that I've wanted to achieve for myself, that I have the tools to.
So what was this, your guru's principal means of working? Was it mainly through darshan?
No,
you were teaching hatha yoga there. And what
actually,
what are the sorts of
actually,
things
I love one of the things he said to me once when I was trying to make a point to someone who was in the ashram with us, and I was right, but he said, "Never tell." That, you know, he was like that. It's like, look, you can tell people, but people have to realise themselves, and realisation is worth so much more than someone telling you.
Yeah.
If you want to move at speed and you're in a group, yes, you need to communicate. You sometimes need to tell. But in terms
teachings and so on.
Maybe in terms of your own working circle, because you know I don't know. You know, if you want to achieve something, maybe you have a deadline and you need to communicate. But I think with something like personal realisation, everybody has their own time and way. You can push, you can lead a horse to water, but you won't make a drink. And the more you try and make a drink, maybe the more it's going to walk away from the water hole. So. Yeah, because other things are involved, like pride and ego, you know. So he wasn't. Of course, he was an orator, and he would have darshan. But for his inner circle and the people who are living there and working with him, no, everything was off the table. You know, it was. I think if you're a spirit, it's like being a spiritual seeker at a higher level is like being a commando. You know what I mean? You've got to be willing to lay down your life. You really do. You've got to be willing to kill the ego constantly. You know, not in a way that not. In fact, that's Scrub that. No, because I believe totally the ego is wonderful. And if you can make it big enough, it encompasses everybody. There's no problem with that. So it's not about killing the ego, but perhaps not destroying, that's not the word, allowing to dissolve a concept you have of yourself. That's a really prime thing for that. The moment you think you know it all, you know nothing, you know. So you're constantly faced with this in the spiritual understanding that nothing is forever and everything's forever. So there's nothing to grab onto. There's nothing to say you are, or there's no crown of what you've done. There's no glory of the future except to fully appreciate every moment. So you're sandwiched between a magnanimous past or a terrible past. You're sandwiched between a fearful future or a wonderful, you know, hopeful, a bright shining star of a future. So here you exist, paper thin, moving along with the tide of that thing that will play itself out if you let it, you know. So, I mean, I find it so difficult when it comes to spiritual things. I don't know if I could be a spiritual teacher, because what is the definition of floating along with the tide? Just that. So, however you can free yourself from stress, but at the same time achieve that which you want, this is the challenge to every human being, spiritual or not. Good luck to everybody, you know. It's like, and you know, even things we're saying about like, what are the signs for you? Or yes, there are archetypal signs, and I'm not saying even with the, you know, psychology and those things, there's a lot, incredible truth in all that. But if you come from the other side of the world and you live on a boat, and you know, it's like I'm saying, your boat is a home to you. Maybe a boat represents crossing Bass Strait here and losing your life. Yeah. So whether it's a positive affirmation or a negative warning will depend on that person's actual experience with those archetypes. So I can't ever find that I can join a school of thought that says this is correct about those things. For me, all I can do is go, if I will dream something and it's strong, I have to pay attention to it. But then I wait for more signs. I go, okay, well, that's, I've got something there, and if I'm open to it, it'll open up and reveal more, and that works for me.
So how do you go from there then, or how did you go from there to spending so much time with the Aboriginal people?
Well, as I said, because that had been a part of my life before that.
Right.
Anyway, so it was only, it became more of a part in the jigsaw puzzle, because the Vedic thing is very close to the Aboriginal thing anyway, because they were the same people that migrated through. The Vedas stayed there. The Aboriginal people, wandered, came to... They're brothers, they're brothers. And you find that link in the Vedic tradition through down to, the Vedas that went all the way down to Sri Lanka and through there too. So, I mean, the land link was there before the ocean rose. So that they were the same people. So there's a very common thread with the Aboriginal and the ancient Indian, yes. And in fact, even the body language, come here, things like this. Unbelievably so. Even, we noticed that recently. We saw those people. Remember, the Tamil. Very similar connection. It's a very ancient connection. So it's fascinating when you think of a lot of the now parts of the jigsaw puzzle we have of history. The real ones, not just the ones in old textbooks, but we're finding now that the oceans rose something like at least 30 to 100 metres since the Ice Age, and have flooded civilizations well in excess of 12 and 15,000 years. And pyramids in Bosnia now carbon dated to 25,000 years. So, we've got such a rich cultural history in the world that we're only just starting to touch the tip of the iceberg, and the Aboriginals represent something that's unbroken, unchanged. So this is where the power is. Time creates beautiful things, and they have a beautiful spiritual energy and understanding. I wouldn't even say belief, it's an understanding. They're part of the nature. They talk to the animals talk to them, and it's this Garden of Eden thing that we lack so much in the West. Not to say that the Garden of Eden can't have its rough days and have a drought. So, but that's the fascination. This connection to place, to beings, to other, to animals, to plants, to universe. To this is the thing all human beings are searching for. So whether you find it through the physical things of genealogy or cultural, or purely to spiritual. So that's hence why I'm so interested in everything from cultural information, music and dance, through to spiritual, because for me it's all part of the same jigsaw puzzle, that it just gives us this, this magical, complete, whole understanding of life and dynamics and magic. It's the magic zone, that's where I want to be.
So you went there.
Yeah.
You spent a lot of time out in the bush.
Yeah.
The two of you, by yourself, and so on. Why did you do that? And how did you learn to live out there?
Well,
not everyone can just walk into the bush for 3 months and
no. As a child, we always went fishing and things. Even I've always, when you grow up in this country, you grow up with nature. So I've always had that fascination. But good question. I mean, I just have an instinct to survive, and if I have a spear, I can catch something. And that's what I wanted to prove to myself.
So you didn't really have any training or anything like that? You just went...
Well, I've speared fish as a kid, and I made my own spear, Hawaiian sling, and would catch my own fish. So being put out, and a little bit of local knowledge about what to eat. We'd spend some time in Arnhem Land. You know, you can eat these things, you can eat these ground nuts, or you can eat this fruits. And I mean, I'd always done a little bit of research about that and knew. But every area is different. So here we were in a totally different area that was full of sharks and crocodiles and, you know, mainly seafood. So we were able to catch, you know, I'd catch at least one shark a day, one small shark a day, and we'd live from that, and fresh water nearby, and try different things and sharpen your spear. And
interesting. That's really fascinating. That's such a fascinating conversation.
Good.
We're almost
A
out
monologue.
of time.
Sorry, you haven't said
No,
much.
no, I'm asking you. It's we're almost out of time, but I would like to, for a few minutes, hear a bit about in your, you know, your work musically. You've done an awful lot of bridge building between the indigenous communities in Australia and I don't know, what would you call them? Everyone else.
Well, indigenous, non-indigenous. I don't even like these terms, to be honest, because there's so many people in Australia that have, a lot of people have Aboriginal without even knowing it.
Yeah.
So, you know, if we're dividing the people and you have to take one side or the other, it's just, I don't even like to think of it in those terms. I mean, we use those terms for definition.
Yeah.
The people in this country and the people that perhaps have the genetic disposition of the land. Yet, if you're born in this land, even as a white person, and your parents made love on that soil and ate the food from this place, you're endemic, if not indigenous. So I find this a really big challenge. I don't like any of those titles. They're all divisive. They're all divisive in some way. So, you know, I kind of like, you know, you say Aboriginal. Aboriginal means person of that place. This is a respectful term. Aboriginal and non-Aboriginal. That's fine. You know, maybe that's better than indigenous and non-indigenous. You know, we're all indigenous to somewhere.
Well, that's true.
And so how can, you know, if it's almost disrespect if I say I'm indigenous and you're not. You're indigenous from the other side of the world, and carry just as much respect as the indigenous person here. So I like to, you know, you understand where I'm coming from. I don't like to go anywhere near that somehow. I work with those people. I work with them because I love them and I love what they do and what they believe. And some of the strongest cultural people are the whitest ones within the communities as well. Because they've, I don't know, you know, they might have been outcast from their tribe, but because of that they've wanted to find their cultural and spiritual root even more. So things are often upside down in this country.
You showed me lots, you know, quite some footage actually of some very powerful collaborations that the two of you did with dancing and these sorts of I don't know how to describe it. Very primal kind of
ceremonies.
Powerful stuff.
We're doing ceremony.
That's right.
We're doing modern ceremony.
That's right. That's amazing. I'll make sure to put links in the description under there to your music and to some of that footage, because it's really powerful stuff. Yeah. Yeah, and then people who are listening to this, who are interested in checking it out, and I really do recommend anyone listening checks out the work that you do. And it's really incredible stuff. Yeah.
Well, for me, art and music and philosophy, it's a job of these people to steer the direction of mankind. And we've lost touch. Corporates and governments have put musicians and artists over in the corner for a reason, because they want to disempower them with their real job. And their real job is to be spiritual, not leaders, spiritual guides, in terms of, like John Lennon, a good example. I mean, you know, he's somebody who, you know, imagine, you know, this is a way of communicating to people an idea that everybody's involved with, and it's always been that way. The shaman of their group or the tribe or heals through music or through vibration and changes things because vibration is the nature of the universe. So what better way to kick it off in a new direction than have a jam?
Good gig.
Have a gig, do a gig. No, but you know what I mean. But to to motivate it with harmonic and vibration.
Have you both been called shamans before? Has that been...
Shaman sounds too old-fashioned to me. I would never be a shaman. You know, shaman is like something from a specific culture. For me, I'm just... well, it's been quoted. I can't use that one. I'd like to say naughty boy.
Naughty boy.
No.
The naughty boy of the ditch.
No, I'm a boundary breaker.
Oh.
I'm a not breaker. I don't like the word boundary stretcher. You know, I mean, I don't even. You know.
Think about stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, you've
Forget
got.
about myself.
But we're all that for ourselves. You know, we have to. If it's not your bank account you're trying to increase your self-worth, or you know. I'm an expander. That's all. You know, and that's.
Just trying to get as much out of life as possible. On all levels.
Yeah,
That's
it's
very
not.
clear. Yeah.
And
I don't even.
Not to waste any time.
And because I have an essential understanding that what I do affects other people, and what other people affects me, and we are essentially connected, I want to enjoy myself to the max, but I don't want to be a negative impact on other people. So it's a very, you know, the simple solution for me is do something that you love, that's good for you, that everybody else likes as well. So, you know, either make lollies and sell beer, or
Yeah. Well, that's great, guys. Thanks so much. Is anything else you want to add to this conversation?
We could go on for another few hours.
I'm sure we could,
No problem.
and you know, we're back.
Maybe
hang on.
Maybe there's.
I do.
Two.
Yeah,
No,
I think so.
but I would like to say, because your last thing was about the work with the Aboriginal and music, and what I would like to say to that is I take it very serious that I can have an impact upon myself and others, and one of the things we've lost touch with as modern humans is the power of invocation. That we, through our ceremonies, whatever, my ceremony in the morning is wake up, have a cup of coffee and a cigarette. That's my ceremony. That's my morning ceremony. That says I'm in control of my life, even to do something bad if I want, and to wake up and face the day in a way that says I'm able to do anything I want. So the reason for this, and with the Aboriginal thing and all this, is a demonstration of that through invocation we can totally change the energy of ourselves, our feeling towards each other, and our will to drive humanity in a far more benevolent potential than it has realised.
Yeah.
And still maintain a relationship with the animals and the earth. Because they're my best friends. The animals are my best friends. You know what I mean? Like they're the ones who are straight out with me. You know what I mean? So
That's a beautiful way to end, I think. Where can people find out more about you? Online, for instance?
Oh, there's lots of places online. Well, firstly, our website, which is www.visionsofinnomad.com. If they're interested in the work we do with the indigenous people, we co-produce a show called ARC Dreaming, ARC Dreaming, which stands for the Australian Reconciliation Company. And they can find also our website online, which is called ARC Dreaming, Aboriginal Dance Theatre.com.
I'll put all those links beneath the interview so people can click through.
Yeah, and then that's Bandcamp where they can discover us.
And buy all your music.
But you won't find that story anywhere. I've never written that story down.
No, that's unique.
So,
Great.
like this story we're talking about. No,
Yes.
if you want this is the story. There is no other story.
Oh, it's fascinating.
This is the
Fascinating.
story.
Michael and Silvana, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thanks for taking the interest
Yeah.
in our lives. That's wonderful. That's very nice.